We ain't gonna tolerate the dumb stuff that was going on.
And that dumb stuff looks a lot like DeMarcus Lawrence's money problems. Micah Parsons just exposed the fact that DeMarcus is going broke.
So at the end of the third year, I go completely broke.
Remember when DeMarcus said this? Turns out it was even worse than we thought. Now Micah's putting it all out there, including where that money really went. And trust me, you won't believe what DeMarcus blew it on. Let's get into it. The financial foundation crumbles. There have been some explosive feuds in the NFL, from Antonio Brown versus Ben Roethlisberger to Richard Sherman and Michael Crabtree. But the one grabbing everyone's attention right now is the beef between Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. But here's the thing, going broke in the NFL shouldn't even be shocking anymore. What many fans don't realize is that behind all the glitz and glamour of NFL stardom lies a statistical nightmare. According to Sports Illustrated, a staggering 75% of NFL players face serious financial difficulties within just 2 years of retirement. But it gets even worse. Fox Business reports that 78% of former NFL players lose their wealth within 3 years of leaving the league. And perhaps most shocking of all, a comprehensive study cited by the National Bureau of Economic Research reveals that nearly 2% of NFL players go bankrupt within 2 years of retirement, with that number skyrocketing to 16% within 12 years. These aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet, folks. These are real people with real families, real dreams, and real consequences when everything goes wrong. And DeMarcus Lawrence, well, he became another statistic in this devastating trend. Now, let me paint you a picture of how this financial disaster unfolded, because the details are absolutely mind-blowing. Picture this. You're a young, talented defensive end who just got drafted into the NFL. DeMarcus Lawrence was selected in the second round of the 2014 NFL Draft out of Boise State. You've just signed what most people would consider a life-changing contract, a 4-year, $5.5 million deal with a $2.3 million signing bonus. Your base salaries for those first 3 crucial years were $420,000, $670,000, and $703,000 respectively. For most people, this would be enough money to set them up for life if managed properly. But here's where the story takes a devastating turn that will make your jaw drop.
Yeah, that's huge for backs.
Huge for backs. And I didn't understand, your core is actually your foundation of your body, and shoot, it was basically telling me, in the spiritual realm that my foundation is messed up. You trying to carry all of this, but you don't have the proper foundation to be carrying all this, so, as soon as you make it in the NFL or in the league, family think, we're rich now, what I mean? All our worries are gone, and, taking on that responsibility as a young man, you think you king of the world, you think you can actually, do this, but you don't understand that, the well will run dry if you ain't replenishing it.
Yeah.
And
can't pour from an empty cup.
This is DeMarcus Lawrence himself speaking candidly about the mindset that led to his financial downfall. But what he's describing here isn't just his personal experience. It's a phenomenon that affects countless young athletes who suddenly find themselves with more money than they've ever seen in their lives.
Yeah, salary doesn't mean that's what you're gonna get up front. No, it means that's what you're gonna earn over time, and we have the opportunity to cut you at any point.
Yeah.
So don't make all of that.
Well, sometimes people say NFL is not for long.
Right.
And there it is, the harsh reality that many young players fail to grasp. Lawrence's admission about his financial struggles came during an appearance on the Level Up Lifestyle podcast, where he opened up about one of the most traumatic experiences of his professional career. But the real bombshell was still to come. By his third year in the NFL, despite earning well over $1 million in total compensation, Lawrence found himself in a position that would make any financial advisor's blood run cold.
Mentally and physically, and now going into my 4th year, it's all right, nope. So at the end of the third year, I go completely broke. Yeah, went completely broke.
Can you imagine that phone call? Picture yourself as a professional athlete who's supposed to be living the American dream, and then your accountant delivers the most devastating news possible.
I get that phone call from my accountant, and he's like, hey man, you don't have no more money in your account. I'm like, how is that possible? What is your job? What are you doing? Why didn't I get this phone call before when I had $10?
Yeah.
What do you mean no more? You mean $0? What are you saying? He's like, I mean negative $100.
Negative $100. Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't just being broke. This was being in debt despite having earned millions of dollars over the course of 3 NFL seasons. The sheer disbelief in Lawrence's voice as he recounts this moment is palpable, and it should serve as a wake-up call to every young athlete listening. But here's where the story gets even more heartbreaking. The timing of this financial revelation couldn't have been worse.
Yeah, but I never forget, like, 2 minutes later, my dad called me. He's like, hey, son, like, you know, I need you to help me out. I need something. I'm like, Dad, man, I ain't even let him finish telling me what he needed help with. I'm like, Dad, like, man, I'm completely broke.
Can you imagine having to tell your father, the man who probably sacrificed everything to help you achieve your NFL dreams, that despite being a professional football player, you can't help him because you have literally nothing left? The emotional weight of that conversation must have been absolutely crushing.
He's like, what do you mean? Like, you know, like,
You're in the NFL.
you're in the NFL. Like, what are you talking about? He was like, Dad, man, my account just said I got $0. She's like, huh? Like, hold on, son. Like, what's going on?
The confusion and disbelief from his father perfectly encapsulates what most people think when they hear about professional athletes going broke. After all, how can someone who's earned millions of dollars find themselves in such a desperate financial situation? But then came the words that would haunt Lawrence for years to come.
Are you stupid? And when he said those words, like, it hit my soul. It's like, are you? Like, because you had a huge blessing right here and you did not steward it well. You did not.
Those words from his father weren't just a question. They were a moment of brutal self-reflection that forced Lawrence to confront the reality of his situation. The context surrounding Lawrence's financial struggles was made even more complicated by his use of amphetamines and a 4-game suspension in 2016 for violating the NFL's performance-enhancing drug policy, which may have contributed to his early financial mismanagement as he sought to help family and close associates.
Squandered it.
Yeah, I definitely squandered it. And it's like, oh man, my dream is falling away again.
This moment of raw honesty reveals the psychological impact of financial ruin on professional athletes. It's not just about the money, it's about the dreams, the expectations, the responsibility to family members, and the crushing weight of knowing you had everything and let it slip away. Now, you might be wondering how this connects to Micah Parsons and the explosive feud that's currently tearing through the Cowboys organization. Well, hold on to your seats because we're just getting started. This financial catastrophe that Lawrence experienced didn't happen in a vacuum. It happened while he was playing alongside some of the most talented defensive players in the NFL, including the man who would eventually become his biggest critic and fiercest rival. When financial struggles meet locker room tensions. Now, here's where things get really interesting, because Lawrence's financial struggles didn't just magically disappear overnight. No, this man had to rebuild his entire life from the ground up, and he had to do it while playing professional football at the highest level. The mental and emotional toll this took on him would eventually manifest in ways that would create friction with his teammates, particularly with a young, hungry linebacker named Micah Parsons.
You know, so I'm in the room, you know, crying and, you know, asking God, why me, you know, and, you know, the Lord came to me and said, you know, you have to learn in order for me to, you know, give you your next blessing. So, like, going into my 4th year, that was contract year.
Can you imagine the pressure? Here's a man who's already lost everything once, and now he's facing his contract year, the most important season of his professional career. This wasn't just about football anymore. This was about survival, about proving that he could be trusted with another opportunity, about showing that he had learned from his devastating mistakes.
So, being broke that whole summer, you know, having to work out, you know, all that, you know, luckily I had a, you know, accountability brother, you know, Tyrone Crawford.
Yeah.
You know, and
The fact that Lawrence had to spend an entire summer preparing for the most important season of his career while being completely broke adds another layer to this incredible story. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. His journey back to financial stability required him to completely change his mindset and approach to both money and football.
he's like, hey, D, man, like, what made you so successful at Boise? He's like, I was like, shoot, I ain't had no money and shoot, like, I had to ride the bike everywhere.
This is absolutely brilliant advice from Tyrone Crawford, and it speaks to something much deeper about success and motivation. Sometimes having too much too quickly can actually be a disadvantage because it removes the hunger and drive that made you successful in the first place.
You know, he was like, well, shoot, that's what we gonna do. You know, so I was like, all right. So, like, every morning before workouts, we actually ride our bikes. to the facility.
Wow.
Yeah, and work
Get your
out.
mind back into that.
But here's where the story takes a dramatic turn, because while Lawrence was going through this personal transformation and rebuilding process, the NFL landscape around him was changing rapidly. When Micah Parsons was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 2021, he brought with him an entirely different energy, a different approach to leadership, and most importantly, a different relationship with money and success. Now, I want you to understand something crucial here. Research into their 2024 season reveals a significant incident during the Cowboys game against the Baltimore Ravens on September 22nd, 2024, which ended in a 28-25 loss. This wasn't just any regular season loss. This was a game that would expose the deep fractures in the Cowboys' locker room and bring Lawrence's past financial struggles back into the spotlight in the most brutal way possible. An article from Yardbarker details a shouting match between Parsons and Lawrence that was captured on camera, with teammate Marshawn Kneeland attempting to calm Parsons down. But what the cameras caught was just the tip of the iceberg of what was really happening behind the scenes. The defensive performance in that Ravens game was absolutely abysmal. The Cowboys' defense gave up 274 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson exploiting their weaknesses. But for Parsons, this wasn't just about one bad game. This was about a pattern of underperformance and leadership issues that he felt needed to be addressed immediately. After the game, Parsons didn't hold back in his criticism. According to an ex-post by John Machota, Parsons said, "Same thing. Right now we just got people trying to be Superman. People just gotta own their jobs. We don't need any Supermans. We just need 11 guys playing together." These words might seem like standard post-game frustration, but they carried much deeper implications about the power struggle happening within the Cowboys' defense. Fan discussions on Reddit, particularly in a post titled "Micah Parsons Gets into Shouting Match with DeMarcus Lawrence, Calls Out Defense After Ravens Loss," confirmed the incident, with comments suggesting Lawrence told Parsons to STFU and play better, indicating Lawrence's assertion of his leadership role. This exchange on the sideline wasn't just about football strategy. It was about respect, authority, and the clash between two very different philosophies of leadership. But here's where Micah Parsons' knowledge of Lawrence's financial past becomes absolutely crucial to understanding this feud. You see, Parsons wasn't just a younger teammate challenging in veterans' authority. He was someone who had witnessed firsthand how financial irresponsibility could impact a player's focus, dedication, and overall contribution to the team. The tension that had been building for months finally reached a breaking point when Lawrence made the decision to leave Dallas. After Lawrence signed a 3-year, $32.5 million deal with the Seattle Seahawks, as reported by NFL.com, he made comments that would ignite one of the most explosive feuds in recent NFL memory. On March 14th, 2025, Lawrence told Hawk blogger,
Dallas is my home. I'm forever going to be there, but, I know for sure I'm not going to win a Super Bowl there.
These words were like throwing gasoline on a fire that had been smoldering for years. Parsons' response was swift and absolutely devastating. On X, Parsons called Lawrence's statement clown shit and accused him of rejection and envy, as reported in an X post by Dov Kleiman. But this wasn't just a random social media outburst. This was a calculated attack from someone who knew exactly where to hit for maximum damage. Lawrence fired back, suggesting Parsons should spend less time tweeting and more time winning, as captured in another X post by Dov Kleiman. But Parsons wasn't done, not by a long shot. Here's where the story gets absolutely explosive, because Parsons had been holding on to information about Lawrence's financial past, and he was about to use it in the most brutal way possible. According to NBC Sports, Parsons said, "I thought it was my time last year, trying to bring that team back in life, even though most people thought we were dead in the water. I think it's my time now. I don't gotta bump heads with no other dude." But the real nuclear bomb was yet to be dropped, in what can only be described as one of the most savage call-outs in NFL history. Parsons decided to expose the financial struggles that Lawrence thought he had kept private. The details of this revelation are so shocking that they sent ripples throughout the entire NFL community. Another article from Fox Sports quotes Parsons saying, "We ain't gonna tolerate the dumb stuff that was going on. Like I said, it's a new regime and a new culture. I'm not saying that other guys weren't culture builders, but some things are just tired, you know what I mean?" These words carried a hidden meaning that would soon become crystal clear. The implications of what Parsons was about to reveal were staggering. Remember, Lawrence's past financial struggles were well documented, including his admission that by the end of his 3rd year, he was broke with a negative $100 balance. But Parsons was about to take this information and weaponize it in a way that would expose not just Lawrence's past mistakes, but also question his credibility as a leader and his right to criticize the organization. Fan discussions on Reddit, such as a post titled "Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence have beef," and have for a while, reinforced this tension, mentioning specific incidents like the argument during the Ravens game and suggesting generational and personality differences, with Lawrence seen as professional but declining, and Parsons as entitled but productive. When private financial struggles become public ammunition. Now let me break down exactly what happened, because the reality is even more fascinating than the rumors. When Lawrence made his devastating comment about not being able to win a Super Bowl in Dallas, he wasn't just criticizing the organization. He was essentially calling out every player who remained with the team, including Parsons. As reported by multiple sources, Lawrence stated, "Dallas is my home, but I know for sure I'm not going to win a Super Bowl there." But here's where the story gets absolutely wild. Parsons' response wasn't just about defending the team. It was about exposing what he saw as Lawrence's hypocrisy. Parsons fired back on X, calling Lawrence's comments rejection and envy and clownship. But the real devastation came in Lawrence's counterattack. Lawrence responded by saying, "Calling me a clown won't change the fact that I told the truth. Maybe if you spent less time tweeting and more time winning, I wouldn't have left." This wasn't just a comeback. This was a direct attack on Parsons' character and his priorities as a professional athlete. Let's examine the online community's reaction to this feud, because it reveals just how divisive this conflict became. On Reddit's r/Cowboys subreddit, users expressed mixed reactions, with some agreeing with Lawrence's realism about the Cowboys' prospects, while others supported Parsons' loyalty. One user captured the sentiment perfectly, saying, "It's too bad that D-Law and Micah couldn't just put their beef aside." But the real fireworks came from the sports media community. Michael Irvin, as reported on X, sided with Parsons, stating, "You are directly part of the reason why we didn't win a Super Bowl in Dallas. That Oprah Winfrey defense that he was a part of. This wasn't just a former player picking sides. This was a Cowboys legend essentially validating Parsons' criticism of Lawrence's performance." On the other side, Emmanuel Acho seemed to support Lawrence's perspective, noting that DeMarcus Lawrence knows what he's talking about, and sometimes the truth hurts. This split in the media perfectly reflected the divided opinions in the football community. But here's where the story takes another dramatic turn. While the public was focused on the Super Bowl comments and the social media exchanges, there was a much deeper conversation happening about leadership, accountability, and the standards expected of Cowboys players. Parsons made it clear that he saw Lawrence's departure as an opportunity to establish a new culture, saying, "I think it's my time now. I don't gotta bump heads with no other dude." But here's what makes this story so compelling. The financial struggles were always there in the background, influencing every aspect of their relationship. When Lawrence criticized Parsons for spending too much time on social media, there was an unspoken irony that someone who had once been financially irresponsible was criticizing another player's professional priorities. The broader implications of this feud extend far beyond just two players arguing on social media. This conflict exposed the deep fractures within the Cowboys organization and raised serious questions about leadership, accountability, and the standards expected of professional athletes. The fact that the feud became so public and so personal suggests deeper issues within the team's culture and communication. The fan reactions on various platforms reveal just how divisive this conflict became, with some users noting that Cowboys will never win a SB. He ain't wrong, while others criticize Parsons as emotional. This split perfectly encapsulates the broader debate about loyalty versus realism in professional sports. But perhaps the most important lesson from this entire story is about the lasting impact of financial decisions on professional athletes' careers and relationships. Lawrence's early financial collapse didn't just affect his bank account. It affected his credibility, his relationships with teammates, and ultimately his legacy with the Dallas Cowboys organization. The ultimate resolution of this feud may never come, as both players are now on different teams with different objectives, but the lessons from their conflict will resonate throughout the NFL for years to come. For Lawrence, his journey from financial ruin to a multi-million-dollar contract with Seattle represents the possibility of redemption and second chances, but the psychological scars of his early struggles clearly influenced his decision to leave Dallas and his willingness to criticize the organization publicly. For Parsons, this conflict represents an opportunity to establish himself as the undisputed leader of the Cowboys' defense and to set new standards for accountability and professionalism. His comments about establishing a new regime and a new culture suggest that he views Lawrence's departure as a chance to reshape the team's identity. The broader NFL community will undoubtedly continue to debate the merits of both players' positions in this conflict. Was Lawrence right to criticize the Cowboys' championship prospects? Or was his departure a betrayal of the team and his teammates? Was Parsons justified in his harsh response, or did his social media activity prove Lawrence's point about misplaced priorities? These questions may never be definitively answered, but they highlight the complex dynamics that exist within modern professional sports. The intersection of financial pressure, social media exposure, leadership expectations, and championship aspirations creates a volatile environment where personal conflicts can explode into public spectacles. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.